This is called How to Ruin a Career. 1980. At the boarding school my mother had convinced me I wanted to attend, I spent 2 years using every free moment to write my first novel. Adventure fantasy, 70,000 words or so, fairly juvenile, probably derivative. I through-wrote it, then spent 2 weeks reviewing, making notes in pen. I retyped it, making changes. I broke into the administration building late at night to use their Xerox machine. I made 3 copies. I mailed one to my parents, handed one to a teacher I adored. A third went to Sarah Lawrence College. I had done well on my first try at the SATs my junior year. My scores went out to a few of my first choice colleges. I feared a senior year of high school with a light course load would see me stoned all the time, kicked out before graduation. The prep school's dean of rule following for academic profit, though, was adamant. If I got into college and left without a senior year, I would not graduate. So I suspended my application process. Then Sarah Lawrence sent me a letter along with their full application packet. They asked why I hadn't followed up after my initial outreach. I completed the application, included a note that if accepted, I would be coming in without a high school diploma, and enclosed an untitled adventure fantasy novel in place of one of the requested essays. Someone came to my dorm room to tell me that my father was on the payphone in the butt room, the dormitory's lead-painted smoking area, where, for our own safety, we smoked beneath asbestos-wrapped pipes while under curfew. I like it when I find out the ages of the audience based on how they respond to different things. I found the receiver hanging from its chrome cord in the chilly room under the dormitory. Dad asked how I was, asked a question about an upcoming long weekend, the reason for his call. When I could stand it no longer, I asked if he had read the book. After a long pause, he said, "Yeah, Dill, we both read it. I don't know what to say. I guess there's some interesting work there. I wouldn't show it to anyone. It's the kind of thing that can ruin a career." Thank you. I ended the call. I couldn't bear to tell him I had already sent a copy off to Sarah Lawrence. Shame burned. I had imagined proudly telling him that he had asked me to finish my application. Now I resigned myself to a senior year at Northfield Mount Hermon, and then maybe if I reapplied, they wouldn't remember the embarrassing novel, or I could go somewhere else. Sarah Lawrence Admissions put a note in with my acceptance letter. They understood the diploma thing, and they would love to have me start in the fall. I did not tell my parents I'd sent the book. For decades afterward, my father made it very clear that he saw my early acceptance to college as a failure to complete high school. Proof of a pattern of failure to complete things. I never showed the manuscript to anyone, not my friends, not my teachers, not Grace Paley, teacher and mentor, the woman who most encouraged me in my work, who might have advised me on how to better the piece, to prepare it for presentation. I never found out what New York agents and editors would say to a 16-year-old novelist with a small fantasy novel about a couple of brothers trying to survive a quest to steal a magical gem from a hostile dragon. I wholly received this half lesson. My writing was flawed so terribly that to show it to anyone would ruin my career. I just hadn't been told what was wrong with it. For 15 years, starting my second year in LA, every year I wrote a spec sitcom, a spec hour long, both for extant series, and at least one thing of my own, a screenplay, a play, a pilot, a book, something. Each went to someone in the industry who I believed might dig it. If it was rejected, I never showed it again because it was rejectable and might ruin my career. I have a Dear John, a Newhart, a Star Trek The Next Generation, a Friends, a Seinfeld that Larry David liked and left me a lovely message about before not hiring me, a Northern Exposure, all scripts that one person saw. My Larry Sanders got me a meeting with Fred Barron, the executive producer of that show, a meeting in which he told me all the reasons he was getting out of the business. If anyone ever gave thoughts rather than a flat rejection, I thanked them and addressed the notes eagerly. I delivered drafts, confusing them, as they thought they had already rejected me. 2002. One of my father's plays went up in Santa Barbara. I drove up to see it and have lunch with him. In therapy, in my 20s or 30s, I had figured out that could ruin your career didn't make sense as a thing to say to a 16-year-old. Nobody in the New York literary world in the early 80s would have read a complete, properly formatted manuscript by a high school student and, regardless of the imitative prose or recognizable story tropes, written them off as an embarrassment to the very language, an insult to their profession, or a shame to hang on their family's name. We ate at an outdoor table. Dad checked his watch and then ordered a scotch. I asked him about the comment. He snorted and got a little misty-eyed, remembering something about his life at the time that I had sent him that book. Jesus, Dylan, that had to have been more about who I was and my fears at that moment than anything you put to the page. I thought about how often I had offhandedly said hurtful, harmful things to people because they touched nerves about my own creative misgivings. I remembered exploding at a talented friend because working on a solo show based on a Bashevis Singer story to which she had not obtained the rights seemed so self-sabotaging that my concern sounded angry, and then insulting, demeaning, discouraging. I did my best to let it go, to forgive myself, to forgive my father. I vowed to retain confidence even after people said, nobody's ever gonna make this. Parenthetically, nobody's ever going to make this, it's too expensive, can come in the same meeting as nobody's even gonna look at anything under $6 million right now. It's not meant to make writers' efforts seem futile, but to make the rejection unassailable, not a subjective decision. Still, to the writer, it comes as a body blow every time. Studio readers, producers, agents, managers habitually inoculate against a continued pitch from an impassioned writer by making the script seem so flawed as to cut off further discussion. I used to believe them. My parents had trained me to universalize. I didn't just drop a glass, I ruined the whole party. I didn't just leave high school without a diploma. I never finished anything. Coming from agents or producers, such statements of the implausibility of my work felt like truth in their familiarity, in their familiality. 2021. A troubling visit to my parents in Boston led to 9 or 12 moments that will eventually go into separate stories and a play. Among the viscera-soaked gems of beautiful, hurtful humanity collected, a passing mention of Dylan's first novel by my father inspired my mother to say, the silly one about the girl hero or the first real one? I said, there was one between those two. She said, oh yeah, the little science fiction thing. But you know what I mean, the one about the comic and the grandfather with the good dialogue. My father said, no, the very first one, the one he never finished.
What?
I said, the one Dad said I shouldn't show anyone because it would ruin my career. My father said, yeah, that one. Sorry about that. She cut him off. Don't you dare apologize for that, Alan. We were right. That manuscript was rife with typos. Typos. In my late 50s, I looked back at a barren timescape of abandoned scripts, of self-doubt, of self-sabotage. Had they only told me that what I needed was an editor, a typist, maybe just a more careful pass to make it submission ready, a lifetime might have been different. Had my mother not been so narcissistic as to feel shame at the thought of an imperfect document going out from her son, had my father been just a little more generous, not even with praise, but with his words, information, the reason behind his declaration, had they not both habitually made universal proclamations, had I not been autistically wired to absorb information in its most literal form, I might have better pursued the career I longed for in my youth, far better positioned myself to indulge the career I pursue now. Now, though, typos panic me. Pages 3, 5, and 872 contain small changes. I apologize for the resubmission. Best, Dylan.